Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama Rama. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram Ram Ram. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Ram Ram Hare. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Haribo Haribo Haribo. Nitai Gora Haribo. Haribo Haribo Haribo. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Jai Ram Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Ram Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vajranaranyana Yashodanandana Vajranaranyana Yamuna Tira Vanutari Yamuna Tira Vanutari Yamuna Tira Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Vajranaranyana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Prabhupada Jaya 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 Prabhupada 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 Jaya Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Sankirtan Yajna ki Jai. Thank you. Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tado jayam udirayet nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Reading from Canto 7, Chapter 1, Text 30. Kamad, Dveshad, Bhayat, Snehad, Yatha, Bhaktyeshvare, Manaha, Aveshya, Tad Agham, Hitva, Bahavas, Tadgatim, Gataha, Kamadveshad Bhayasnehad, Yatha Bhakteshvara Manaha, Aveshatad Agham Hitva, Bahavastad Gatim Gataha, Kamadveshad Bhayasnehad, Yatha Bhakteshvare Manaha, Aveshatad Agham Hitva, Bahavastad Gatim Gataha, Kamadveshad Bhayat Snehad, Yatha Bhakteshvare Manaha, Aveshatad Agham Hitva, Bahavastad Gatim Gataha, Kamadveshad Bhayasneha, Yatha Bhakteshvare Manaha, Bahavastad Gatim Gataha, Kamadvesha Bhayasneha,
यथा भक्त्येश्वरे मनः आवेश तदघं हित्वा बहवस्तद्गतिं गताः कामद्वेषात् भयात् स्नेहात् यथा भक्त्येश्वरे मनः आवेश तदघं हित्वा बहवस्तद्गतिं गतः कामात् from lust, dveshat from hatred, bhayat from fear, snehat from affection, yatha as well as, bhaktya by devotion, Ishvare in the Supreme, Manaha the mind, Avesha absorbing, Tat of that, Agham sin, Hitva giving up, Bahavaha many, Tat of that, Gathim path of liberation, Gataha attained. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention and giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. I shall now explain how one receives Krishna's mercy simply by concentrating one's mind upon Him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-39, Vikriditam Braja Vadubhir Idam Cha Vishnu Shraddhanvito Nushrunayad Atha Varnayedyah Bhaktim Param Bhagavati Pratilabhya Kaman Hridrogam Ashva Apahinoti Achirena Dhiraha. If a bona fide listener hears of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, which seem to be lusty affairs, the lusty desires in his heart, which constitute the heart disease of the conditioned soul, will be vanquished, and he will become a most exalted devotee of the Lord. Okay, that's a mouthful. Hare Krishna. If one who hears of the gopis' lusty behavior with Krishna becomes free from lusty desires, certainly the gopis who approached Krishna became free from all such desires. Similarly, Shishupal and others who were very much envious of Krishna and who constantly thought of Krishna became free from envy. Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda were fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness because of affection. Now, when the mind is somehow or the other fully absorbed in Krishna, the material part is very soon vanquished, and the spiritual part, attraction to Krishna, becomes manifest. This indirectly confirms that if one thinks of Krishna enviously, simply because of thinking of Krishna, he becomes free from all sinful reactions and thus becomes a pure devotee. Examples of this are given in the following verse. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vashalam phangum langhayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. So we are discussing the 7th canto, 1st chapter, which begins with Maharaj Parikshit asking a question to Sukadeva Goswami, where he is asking if the Supreme Lord, if he has friends and enemies. So that's the question. Sukadeva Goswami is being asked, well, it seems that the Supreme Lord is taking sides of Indra and he's killing the demons. I thought the Supreme Lord was neutral. He didn't have friends and enemies, like the conditioned soul has friends and enemies. And so he asked, and he's humble, and he says, I'm sure there is something that I'm not understanding properly. Can you please, help me understand this? So that's how the chapter begins. King Parikshit inquired, my dear Brahmana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, being everyone's well-wisher, is equal and extremely dear to everyone. How then did he become partial like a common man for the sake of Indra and thus kill Indra's enemies? How can a person equal to everyone be partial to some and inimical towards others? And then, of course, then he says, and then Sukadeva Goswami begins to answer, and he explains that the Supreme Lord is actually completely transcendental. He is not influenced by the three modes of material nature. He actually has no friends and enemies, and whatever he does is all auspicious for the living entity. Whether he kills somebody or he embraces somebody, both are auspicious for the living entity, and both are coming from a place of well-wishing. And then, like Bhagavatam is most often like a story within a story within a story. And then Sukadeva Goswami, he cites that similar question was asked, by Maharaj Yudhishthir. When the Rajasuya Yajna was happening, after the whole, Kurukshetra war is over, and Maharaj Yudhishthir is the emperor. So he performs a Rajasuya Yajna. And then Krishna, he's the chief guest for the Rajasuya Yajna. And in that Rajasuya Yajna, even Shishupal comes. And as we know, Shishupal has been offending Krishna. He's been counting 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's been offending Krishna, left, right and center. And in this Rajasuya Yajna, it comes to a pinnacle where Lord Krishna, anyway, he says, I've had enough. And then he releases Sudarshan Chakra and he kills Shishupal, he beheads him. But then what happens after that is what, Yudhishthira Maharaj is like, wow. So the soul of Shishupal, it merges into the body of Krishna. And so Yudhishthira Maharaj, he asks this question to Narada Muni. How is this possible? And Shishupal was such an envious person. And typically what we hear in scriptures is that the persons who are, envious of the Supreme Lord, who are demoniac in nature, like in Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, their destination is downwards. But how is this possible that, he is, merged into the Supreme Lord's body? So Yudhishthira Maharaj, he asked that question. And Narada Muni is answering that question. And so what we are hearing now is Narada Muni's answer to Maharaj Yudhishthira, which Sukadeva Goswami is repeating for Maharaj Parikshit. So it's like that. It's just a little background. And so the theme of these verses, just read some translation. Like for example, 2 days ago we heard for example, 7:126, like way back, today we are 30 here, but a few days ago. Therefore, by enmity or by devotional service, by fear, by affection, or by lusty desire, almost the same verse. By all of these or any one of them, if a conditioned soul somehow or other concentrates his mind upon the Lord, the result is the same. For the Lord, because of his blissful position, is never affected by enmity or friendship. So this verse that we're reading today is almost identical to 7:126. And then 27 we read, Aradhamani continued, by devotional service one cannot achieve such intense absorption in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one can through enmity towards him. That is my opinion. So we were discussing this, the other day he spoke nicely, Jeremy Prabhu, but yesterday again we were discussing, this verse. So here Aradhamani is saying, by devotional service one cannot achieve such intense absorption in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one can through enmity towards him. That is my opinion. So we're like, So we were discussing, and then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, in the purport, long purport, he talks about Raga Bhakti. He talks about Raga Bhakti, where actually they are intensely absorbed in devotional service. They are on that platform. So here, the devotional service that Narada Muni is obviously referring to is the stage of devotional service that we are in, which is like sadhana bhakti, like sometimes on, sometimes off, sometimes on, sometimes off. So compared to that kind of on and off mixed devotional service, these persons who are inimical, they are absorbed in Krishna. So that's what is the verse. Yeah, so every word is important. So by devotional service one cannot achieve such intense absorption. He's not saying love of God. So right now we're sticking to the point that is being talked about is like in one sense like absorption, like even in these verses, the mind. So he's saying, Aradhamani is saying, one cannot achieve such intense absorption in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as one can through enmity towards him. This is my opinion. So it's not, we should not get bewildered. It seems like a contradiction. So he's talking about this on and off, intermittent devotional service. Like yesterday I was having a discussion with Chaitanya Prabhu. He was talking about how, it's a discussion about thinking about Krishna. You see, with the thinking about Krishna, that is also a thought. But then what interrupts thinking about Krishna, that is also a thought. So there was the discussion. It's like how to, break that and then stay on this. We're always thinking about Krishna like that. That was a discussion. So here, such personalities are absorbed in thinking about Krishna. And so the credit is actually to Krishna. The credit belongs to Krishna. That Krishna, one of the Krishna's qualities that is described in Upanishad, he is prophylactic. Anything that comes in contact with Krishna, that becomes purified. Akama sarva kamo va, moksha kama udaradi. So even if one has all desires, like here, so there is some examples are given, whether one has lusty desires, one is inimical, one is fearful, one has affection. So these are all in a way different desires, one can say. But any of them, if they come in contact with Krishna, they'll become purified. So the purifying agent is Krishna. So that's what we were discussing yesterday. And so in this day and age, like yesterday Krishna Prabhu was saying, the easiest way to remember Krishna is by chanting the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the whole idea of japa is bringing, this contaminated consciousness. Like from Kapila Dev's teaching, there is chitta, there is ahankara, there is mana, there is buddhi, there is mana, and then there are senses, gross and like working senses and intelligent, and knowledge acquiring senses. So the idea of japa is to bring the contaminated consciousness in contact with Krishna, in the form of his holy name. And that purifies. Chethodarpanamarjanam bhavahada bhaganirvapanam. So in a way, it's quite simple in this age to somehow or the other, from wherever the mind wanders, bring the mind back to the holy name. That's the idea. So it's a practice, it requires practice, abhyasa. And that's what we have to do. And then by doing that, the mind becomes purified actually. So that's recommended for us. Like Prabhupada earlier in some of the purports he writes, one can, it's ideal that one thinks about Krishna favorably. I mean, all these things, if one has such feelings, also one can get purified. But then it's nice to think about Krishna favorably, and so we are trying to do that. And then, for us, what do we do? What is the practical thing we need to do? It begins with the beat back, begins with the chanting of the holy name. Okay. So now coming to this verse. Many persons have attained liberation simply by thinking of Krishna with great attention and giving up sinful activities. This great attention may be due to lusty desires, inimical feelings, fear, affection, or devotional service. And then in the next few verses, examples are given. But here, Prabhupada quotes a very famous verse, Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-39. So some of you are aware of the discussions between Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. So they begin with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asking Ramananda Rai, what is the goal of life? And then Ramananda Rai speaks something. Then he says, no, that's external. He says, speak more. And then he accepts the words from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, that's the goal of life. And then that discussion actually continues, which takes off. And some of those verses are really off limits for us. And then again, towards the end, it comes down again, which maybe we can read. So this verse, so Ramananda Rai, he asks Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one second, let me see if I can find it. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela, chapter 8, text 255. Those of you that like references. Chapter 8. Talks between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. So all the way down, 8:255. So anyway, so the discussion, after he accepts the goal of life, then summarily the discussion goes into the top rasa. Then he explains how neutrality, then dasya rasa, then sakya rasa, then vatsalya rasa, then madhurya rasa. Madhurya rasa is the topmost, and amongst madhurya rasa there is swakiya and parakiya, wedded and unwedded. So it's really esoteric stuff. And then Lord Chaitanya says, speak more. And then Ramananda said, well, I have never spoken these things, and I don't know how I'm speaking. I think you're asking me to speak. I don't even know what I'm speaking, but you're making me speak and I'm speaking. Anyway, so that discussion goes, and then Srimati Radharani, she's the topmost devotee, and then really amazing stuff. Yeah. And then it again comes down, as I said. Yeah. And then again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he asked Ramananda Rai some nice questions. Yeah. For example, he says, on one occasion, Lord inquired, of all types of education, which is the most important? Ramananda Rai replied, no education is more important than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. So the question is what is the best? What is the best? Out of all glorious activities, which is the most glorious? that person who is reputed to be a devotee of Lord Krishna enjoys the utmost fame and glory. What is the topmost? Of the many capitalists who possess great riches, who is the topmost? He who is richest in love for Radha and Krishna is the greatest capitalist. Of all kinds of distress, what is the most painful? That. Anyway, so then he goes on, and then he asks, text 255, out of all topics people listen to, which is best for all living entities? Ramananda Rai replied, hearing about the loving affairs between Radha and Krishna is the most pleasing to the ear. So then Prabhupada, because this is like a buyer's beware. So Prabhupada writes in this beautiful purport, he quotes the same verse. And then he's writing, a liberated person who hears about the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna is not inclined to have lusty desires. But one mundane rogue once said that when the Vaishnavas chant the name Radha, Radha, he simply remembers a barber's wife named Radha. Yeah. He says one mundane rogue once said that when the Vaishnavas chant the name Radha, Radha, he simply remembers a barber's wife named Radha. Radha. He simply remembers a barber's wife named Radha. This is a practical example. Unless one is liberated, he should not try to hear about the loving affairs between Radha and Krishna. If one is not liberated and listens to a relation of the rasa dance, he may remember his own mundane activities and illicit connections with some woman whose name may also be Radha. In the conditioned stage, one should not even try to remember such things. By practicing the regulative principles, one should rise to the platform of spontaneous attraction for Krishna. Then and only then should one hear about Radha Krishna Leela. Although these affairs may be very pleasing both to conditioned and to liberated souls, the conditioned souls should not try to hear them. The talks between Ramananda Rai and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are conducted on the platform of liberation. But anyway, here we are discussing. So we skipped that section, in case you didn't notice. So anyway, so it seems like a contradiction. Yeah, it seems like a contradiction. Here, even Ramananda Rai is saying that of the topics to be heard, the most important or the most amazing topics to be heard are the affairs of Radha and Krishna. And then here, this verse also is saying that. But then Srila Prabhupada, in his purport, he talks about, some caution. He expresses caution. Just like how, even like in television, we see so many advertisements. They talk about this medicine which will cure your ill, but then they say, well, you might have diarrhea and you might have bad dreams. You may not be able to sleep. So there is always some caution. So here Srila Prabhupada is allowing that we can hear, but then occasionally. And then firstly, he says a bona fide listener. Yeah? In this purport he says, a bona fide listener. If a bona fide listener hears of Krishna's pastimes with the gopis, which seem to be lusty affairs, the lusty desires in his heart, which constitute the heart disease. The heart disease of the conditioned soul, Hridrogam, will be vanquished and he will become a most exalted devotee of the Lord. Yeah. So, bona fide listener. So, what does that mean? It means many, many things. But a bona fide listener means obviously he is in a disciplic succession, or he's aspiring to be in a disciplic succession. He is aspiring to be a devotee of the Lord. At least in our context, he is aspiring to be a pure devotee of the Lord. He doesn't go here and there and listens everywhere. So he hears in parampara, so he hears from pure devotees. Then a bona fide listener, he hears and he starts with the basics, like I am not the body, I am the spirit soul, like Bhagavad Gita. So there is a progression in how the bona fide listener, how he listens, what he listens to. It's not like it's not whimsical. It's, very, yeah, and one can say, focused. Yeah, one listens with the right attitude. Like in this case, for example, let's say when he's hearing, not very rarely, very rarely we hear these pastimes. For example, when would we hear? Like at least my Guru Maharaj. We hear these Radha Krishna Leela like once in 3-4 years. That too for like a day. When we go to Vraj Parikrama. And we can see like even, it's a confession. Like I could see like the first Vrindavan Parikrama that I attended. And when I was hearing, these, it was nice when, Krishna's childhood pastimes and killing of demons and all that. But the moment, this topic, was like open, I was like feeling very uncomfortable. Do we have to talk about this? But it's my mundane, interpretation about, what these affairs are. And then, so that was like the first parikrama. And then 4 years later, another Raja parikrama. Like, oh wow, it's okay. This is like after 4 years to hear. So it's like once in a blue moon, special days. We hear, especially in the holy dham, in the company of devotees where, the consciousness is uplifted and we are open somehow to hearing such things, we hear. It's not like a regular affair. Regularly we hear basics, ABCDs of Krishna consciousness. Because that is also purifying. So I just wanted to share that. Yeah. If a bona fide listener hears of Krishna's pastime with the gopis, which seem to be lusty affairs, the lusty desires in his heart, which constitute the heart disease. So the word that is being talked about here is Bhagavatam verse, is Hrid Rogam, heart disease, Hrid Rogam. So I was hearing this nice lecture yesterday. So this devotee was sharing, in the mundane world, what's heart disease? High cholesterol, or, hypertension, or irregular heartbeat, or, all these things. But then, according to Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, according to the scriptures, the real heart disease is, these enemies, the 6 enemies, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. And Srila Prabhupada, he talks about this in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the divisions of faith. And in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is asking, what is this enemy? Even a man of intelligence, he gets bewildered. So and Krishna says it is lust only, Arjuna. That is the all-devouring sinful enemy. And in that purport, Prabhupada writes, I think Bhagavad Gita 330, you can read it. So Prabhupada writes the whole, he gives a complete analysis. He talks about how, in the conditioned life, the mind is the epicenter of all the senses. Around the mind are clustered the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses. And the mind, the conditioned mind, under the influence of the false ego, has propensity to enjoy. So he says, well, this is good, this is bad. So all these conceptions about, happiness and distress, they are in the mind. So that's one thing. And then Prabhupada also writes that the intelligence is the next door neighbor of the soul. And then in that purport he writes, so what that intelligence, and then in the 17th chapter he writes the heart, how the heart could be in the mode of goodness, could be in the mode of passion, could be in the mode of ignorance, or a combination of that. So that heart, which is, and then Krishna is explaining the divisions of faith, why somebody has some faith in this, why somebody has some faith in that. So the mode of goodness person, whose heart is in the mode of goodness, he has faith in, like Krishna, like that. So there Prabhupada writes that how the heart that is influenced by these modes of material nature, accordingly, desires are there. Prabhupada has always explained, is always connected thoughts with the mind and feelings with the heart. So here the word that is being talked about is hridrogam, heart disease. And then also, as we discussed earlier, so there is the mind and there is the intelligence. So typically we have the idea, the intelligence like being here in a brain. But here Prabhupada is saying the intelligence is the next door neighbor of the soul. Okay? And then from our scriptures, what we understand, the soul, it resides here, in the heart, near the chamber of the heart. So the intelligence that is being talked about, in a way, is not this sort of cognitive, heady intelligence, but that buddhi yogam, tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam, dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. So our intelligence, our heads and heart, one can say, they have to be connected. If they are disconnected, then we have a problem. So here, Prabhupada is talking about intelligence being the next door neighbor of the soul, and the heart is there. So the heart, hridrogam, so the heart has to be purified, one can say. The mind has to be purified, the heart has to be purified. And then, so the mind, as I said earlier, it only has a conception of, well, this is favorable, this is happiness, this is distress. It's a binary processor. But the heart, as Krishna also mentions, sangat sanjayate kama, the desires are developed according to the association we keep. So this whole verse is saying that even though one's heart may have all these diseases of envy, lust, fear, anger, craziness, but then somehow or the other, if that conditioned soul, if he associates with Krishna, means associates with Krishna's pure devotees, then the heart becomes purified. And then he says very quickly, Prabhupada writes, very quickly, one comes to the platform of becoming a most exalted devotee. If one who hears of the gopis' lusty behavior with Krishna becomes free from lusty desires, certainly the gopis who approached Krishna became free from all such desires. So anyway, I'm not going to comment much on this because it seems to indicate, that the gopis had lusty desires. And so he's saying, well, if I can be purified by hearing, gopis can also become purified, by being with Krishna. So Prabhupada explains this, that it's like gold and iron. It looks the same, but it's not the same. So even these affairs of gopis with Krishna, they seem like, Prabhupada writes, they seem like lusty desires, lusty affairs, but they're not. Anyway, so continuing. Similarly, Shishupal and others who were very much envious of Krishna and who constantly thought of Krishna became free from envy. Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda were fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness because of affection. Now the next one. When the mind is somehow or other fully absorbed in Krishna, the material part is very soon vanquished and the spiritual part, attraction to Krishna, becomes manifest. So this is what we are talking about here. When the mind is somehow or the other fully absorbed in Krishna. So we hear that we have these conditioned senses, right? And then beneath the conditioned senses are the spiritual senses, with which actually one actually does devotional service. Real devotional service is done by by spiritual senses that are awakened. So of course, devotional service, there are different stages. One is Vidhi Sadhana Bhakti. So in Vidhi Sadhana Bhakti, one is engaging these conditioned senses Prabhupada is using, right? The material counterpart, one can say. There is a spiritual counterpart, but one is using these material counterpart, the material mind, the material intelligence, material, the senses, working in knowledge acquiring senses. But when they are engaged in the service of Krishna, they become spiritualized. The same senses, they become spiritualized. Like the example that is given, the iron rod, then when it is put in the fire, it becomes like fire. So these senses, although they are material, they are conditioned, they again regain their original position. Yeah. And what is the original position? The original position, again, so coming back to like this hridrogam, it's a heart disease. But what is the natural condition of the heart? Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoy Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Koriya Uday. So, Uday. Uday means it awakens, like the Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. So, Chandra Udaya, Udaya means rising. So, the moon is there. It's not that the moon, is created, but at a particular time, like when it is night, the moon arises, comes up. So similarly, this Krishna prema is not something to be gained from extraneously and then, put in the heart. It's a natural condition of the heart. And it is awakened by Shravana Adi Shuddha Chitte. By Shravanam, Kirtanam, and then the Chitta, consciousness is purified. Then the real quality of the heart, which is unalloyed devotional service, it comes to the surface. And so this heart disease is gone. Like that. Shrunvatham Sukatha Krishna Punya. Right? That verse is like Vidyantasto hi abhadrani vidhanoti surasatam. So this heart disease is there, but then there is a process to take care of the heart disease. Shravanam, Kirtanam. And largely, the challenge is the mind. As we can see, I think all of us are here because we do enjoy, we really love, I wouldn't say love, but we like to chant and hear, we like to read scripture, we like prasadam, definitely. Yeah, we love prasadam. So the heart's natural inclination is there. It is attracted towards Krishna. No doubt about it. But then, so what is the challenge? Largely the challenge is the mind. When we say, I declare, when Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness means declaring a war against Maya. Well, but the battle is largely with our mind. And so somehow or the other, when this mind, is turned back into our friend, then the heart's desire to engage in uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service, that manifests. So largely the battle is with the mind. Yeah. This indirectly confirms that if one thinks of Krishna enviously, simply because of thinking of Krishna, he becomes free from all sinful reactions and thus becomes a pure devotee. Anyway. So we'll pause here. The idea again here is somehow or the other, whatever may be my condition, if somehow or the other I bring myself to devotional service, to Krishna, I have hope. Because Krishna is all merciful. So another thing is it's not an ascending process. So Krishna is there. My effort is there, of course, but then Krishna is there. Like Yashodananda was speaking on Sunday. I'm not fighting this battle alone. Krishna has 6 opulences. He's all powerful. He's all attractive. So when I have Krishna or devotional service on my side, then I have hope. I can remain enthusiastic. I can maintain faith, even in the midst of spiritual crisis. When the dark night of the soul, as I say, everybody has to go through that, where one has to face mainly these 6 enemies, and then go over to the other side. Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for a wonderful class. In chapter 18 of the Gita, Krishna says, Mamana Baba Mabato, always think of me.
Yeah.
So it appears that we have power to think of Krishna. But previously in chapter 15, Krishna says, Sarvasha Chaham Hridi Sanavishto Matashmita Gyanam Upahanam Shah. I am seated within everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance. So you were making a point that we should think of Krishna favorably. But sometimes in the material world, before our Krishna conscious days, we have the tendency to think of others unfavorably, either due to pride, envy, or vengeance. And when we come in devotee association, these anarthas may still linger. You know, when there's some friction between devotees, we may still have this tendency for pride, envy, or vengeance. I mean, even Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Amar Jivan said, I'm remorseful seeing others happy, and the miseries of others is a great source of pleasure for me. So as far as thinking of Krishna is concerned, we may think it's possible to think of Krishna on our own accord, but can you explain how that's not, or maybe you could expand on this point? My understanding is that it's maybe not necessarily that possible if we think of others unfavorably. Even in the material world, think of others unfavorably. What to speak of devotees? Because everyone is, like you said, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema.
That's
this
good.
love of God is within everyone's heart. So maybe you could expand on that a little, if possible.
Yeah. Sure. One second. Okay. Yes. So these favorable feelings, not just towards Krishna, but Krishna's parts and parcels as well. And this is confirmed by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in his discussion with devotees, when devotees asked them, what will be favorable for my chanting, this Kirtaniya Sadahari, what will be favorable for such chanting? So of course initially his response was to cultivate relationships with friendly relationships with devotees. But then later on he also expanded that not just devotees, but not having inimical feelings or having friendly relationships with all living entities. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned that, and then one can chant. Even Parikshit Maharaj, like towards the end of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, if somehow or the other, I don't make it back home, back to Godhead, then I have three desires. That somehow or the other, I get pure devotional service. Second, I always have the company of pure devotees. And the third one, he says, Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, have friendly relationship with all living entities. Yeah. So everyone is a part and parcel of Krishna. And if we are calling ourselves Vaishnavas, like the offenses, if one claims to be a Vaishnava, so if we are calling ourselves Vaishnavas, then that means the Vaishnava means he is like Vishnu. His qualities are like Vishnu. Of course, minute, but they are like Vishnu. And then what is the Vishnu's qualities? Like in this section we are reading, he is not inimical. He doesn't have friends and enemies. So if we are talking about being Vaishnavas, then we have to come to the platform. That's one thing. Another thing also is, if we look at it from our own body, it's like we have different parts of our body, like the hands and the legs and the eyes and the nose and so on and so forth. So to be unfavorably disposed to some part of the body it will be harmful for us. So similarly, even the universal form Krishna is describing actually, that all the living entities, they are parts and parcels of him. They are parts and parcels of Krishna. So coming back to the point that you're mentioning, if we have some issue with a living entity, then actually it's our issue with God. It's not with the living entity, so to speak. yeah, so it affects, our devotional service. That's what we were discussing yesterday. So our goal, of late I've been meditating upon this. So our goal is, I want to learn to be favorably disposed to all living entities. Follow? Because if the goal is I want to learn, because then you could succeed, you could fail. It's not a problem because you're learning. Like when Srila Prabhupada, when some people found fault with Prabhupada's disciples, well, he said, well, they're taking a shower. They're not yet clean. They're taking a shower, so they're becoming clean, but they are completely clean. So similarly, if my goal, like in 11.330, very famous verse, the translation says, one should learn how to associate with the devotees of the Lord. And then in the purport also, the disciples of Prabhupada write at least 3 or 4 times, one should learn to increase one's love for the devotees. So this is a educational moment. It's a training and educational moment. So we have to learn. It's not, we'll not succeed all the time. But if I'm learning, like for example, if I'm learning to walk, I'll fall. Sometimes I'll fall down. But I'm not going to beat myself up for it. I'm going to get up again. Then I'm going to try to walk again. So similarly, if our goal is, I'll try, like I was having this discussion yesterday. If my goal is, I'm learning to chant attentively, I can't fail. Yeah, of course, one has to be sincere then. It's not like, I'm learning to chant attentively. But it's a very conscious effort, like, okay, what are the parameters? Let's say chanting attentively. What's getting in the way of chanting attentively? Well, this, heavy meals in the night or, late night sleeping is not working. So then, okay, something has to be done about that. So it's a conscious, alert, awake, practice. So similarly, what gets in the way of, friendly relationships with all living entities. From what I've learned, actually we see from our past. Whatever we see in this world, we see from our past. We see from our past, we hear from our past. So this is the filters that we are seeing the world with. So the actual issue is here. So if we purify, our past, however we do it, then we can actually see, wow, everybody is a part and parcel of Krishna. And, so it's not really my prerogative to judge, to be on the judgment seat and say, devotee, non-devotee, good, bad. That's Krishna's department. It's not my department. Yeah. So it's very important. And especially our movement is a movement of compassion. So if you judge somebody, discernment is different. It's not like we are blind. We don't see, a tiger and a cow. We are discerning, but we are not judging. Like that. And then, because you cannot receive, for example, you cannot receive, if you judge something or somebody, you cannot receive from them. Similarly, if you judge somebody, you cannot actually also give them. It seems like you're giving them, but it's more like, subtly, it's condescending. I'm better than you, and you take it. So it's, that people are not really inspired by that. So we have to, So judgment is the problem. Yes, I was having this discussion yesterday. So when we are looking at anything, so this morning also I was having a class, to practice actually, to really just see things and not get into like, oh, this is nice, this is, not nice, for example. Try to stay on the description level. For example, oh, Prabhupada is wearing, garland, got a white flower, red flower, is wearing a scarf, and then this is golden in color. Kishori, they have a green backdrop. So you can describe to your heart's content. But then where we get in trouble is then when we get into like, I like this, I don't like this, Because then what happens, the next thing is after describe, you interpret. You get into the realms of interpretation. Then the next thing that follows interpretation is judgment. You judge, and then you conclude, he's nonsense or she's nonsense, and that's it. Then you're done. And then that inhibits connection actually. It goes against the grain. We are trying to connect with people, and then judgment, it inhibits connection. It disconnects people. So anyway, Hare Krishna. Anything else? So it requires, just one last thing. So it's not some sentimental idea. So it really requires us to come to the spiritual platform. Like the Bhagavad Gita verse. He sees the equality because he sees the soul. So we see the conditioning, we definitely see the conditioning, but that's not the person. That's the gross and the subtle covering of the living entity. The living entity is different. So actually we can only practice this, having friendly relations with all living entities, if we really come to the spiritual platform. Otherwise we can't. It seems like a nice sentiment, and it'll be like on and off. Sometimes I love you, sometimes I hate you. Hare Krishna. Krishna.
Prabhu, in the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada is saying that only one cannot engage only envy in Krishna service.
Yeah.
He was giving an example with anger, with Hanuman, and how anger can be and lust can be engaged, but he said that envy cannot be engaged in Krishna service. But now in this purport we see in the last sentence that Prabhupada is saying that if one thinks enviously, he'll become free from sinful reactions and become a pure devotee. Do you want to comment something on this?
Prabhupada's right there, ask him.
He wouldn't answer me, otherwise I would ask. Seems a contradiction.
Well, if you read, this indirectly confirms. So I don't know what that indirectly means. This indirectly confirms that if one thinks of Krishna enviously, simply because of thinking of Krishna, he becomes free from all sinful reactions, and thus becomes a pure devotee. Well, in a way, there is no contradiction. What Prabhupada is saying is, envy cannot be, what did you say? Dovetailed. Envy cannot be dovetailed in Krishna's. In everything else can be dovetailed, but envy cannot be dovetailed. Yeah. We'll come back to that. We were discussing that yesterday evening again. So let's stay here on topic. The topic here is, so Krishnanand Prabhu is asking in Nectar of Instruction. Prabhu says that lust can be again converted back to love. Anger can be used in devotional service. But envy is something that cannot be used. But here Prabhupada is saying even if one is envious, in that envy one is always thinking about Krishna. Then because of thinking about Krishna constantly, he becomes purified and he becomes a pure devotee. So we were discussing this last night, right? So again, there are let's say even if you have to be envious, you have to be super envious. Where you think about Krishna all the time. So it's not like a small time person who is envy. That sort of envy again cannot be dovetailed. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah, because that sort of small time envy again is intermittent. It's not he doesn't hate Krishna to the core so much that he thinks about Krishna all the time. So that envy cannot be. So there are two things have to happen. So that envy has to go to the nth degree, or that envy has to be transformed again.
Okay, so the point here is that even if they're envious, but they are 100% thinking of Krishna all the time, absorbed, then they will get purified. Otherwise, they cannot.
Exactly. So the purifying, I mean, it's not the envy that is purifying. I'm sure we all know that. So it's the association with Krishna that is purifying. And so then, to the extent that one is envious, to that extent one is absorbed in Krishna. And then somehow that contact with Krishna purifies him. That's how I reconcile to it. That's how it makes sense to me. Yeah. So it's almost like the same, like the earlier verse. By devotional service, like through that devotional services, we're talking about like this intermittent, like that's the same thing here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. The four things are mentioned: lust, dvesh, bhaya, and sneha, affection. So we all have it in our heart already, but we have it for material things. So unless and until we have experience, we cannot direct it to Krishna. These things. So is it talking about bhava platform, these four things? Are these four things on bhav platform, like kam, dvesh, bhaya and sneha? Those people are having these feelings toward Krishna, they are on bhav platform, because we cannot have these feelings on this stage, right? We have these feelings for material things, but not for Krishna. But Prabhupada gives example of Kam, Dvesh, Bhaya and Sneha, and they were all devotees of Krishna. So if they are on Bhav platform, that's what I'm asking. Or I can repose my question in this way: can we direct our feelings, these four feelings, to Krishna?
Yes.
How? That's my question.
Well, that's what even Krishna Nam is asking. Like this, for example, this affection that is being talked about, right? Here, affection. Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. The affection that the Vatsalya Rasa, the affection that they have for Krishna, sort of that is the source. That is the source of the affection that all the parents that are there in the conditioned world, conditioned souls that are parents, that the affection that they have for children, their children, the profound affection that they have for their children, the source is coming from that Vatsalya Rasa, the Adi Rasa, the original Rasa. So that affection that I have for my child, and where is it coming from? I mean, the fountainhead is actually in Krishna. So, for example, let's say that affection. And then we understand that Krishna, he is actually the father of all living entities, according to the scriptures. So he has unlimited affection. He has affection for all the living entities. So then when we understand that, oh, actually it's not my affection, this affection also that I'm feeling for my child actually, as we understand, it's not my love. Like even like, let's say we look at the parampara, right? Guru parampara. What I'm giving to, let's say, another living entity, like I'm preaching, let's say, I'm taking care of somebody. Actually I'm receiving from behind me and I'm giving it to that living entity. It's not mine. Krishna is at the source and it's an unbroken chain and it's flowing. So similarly, this love that any living entity, for example, has for their child, its source is there. So so it's not even mine, it's Krishna's. And so as a parent, and I mean those of us that are parents, so we are just trying to be transparent representatives of giving the affection of Krishna that he has for living entities to our children. That's how the affection, material affection, is engaged in the service of Krishna. And then, lust, for example. What is lust? Lust is Atmendriya Priti. I am at the center and Prema is Krishnendriya Priti. So what will be pleasing to Krishna? That. So the same activities, and then we have an understanding that actually Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure. So by pleasing him, I'll also get nourished. I'll also get pleasure. So I don't have to separately endeavor for my own happiness. That comes about because of the false ego, ahankara. So in this way, the karma can again be, dovetailed back to Krishna, to love, like that, and fear also. Is that okay? Hare Krishna.
A question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's a quick question. At one point, Srila Prabhupada is saying that those who are liberated soul, they are supposed to hear Krishna and Radha's pastime. And here it is mentioned that those who are bona fide listeners, they can hear these pastimes and they can purify themselves. So I was thinking, what is the gap between a liberated soul and a bona fide listener? Because a bona fide listener is not always a liberated person.
He's on the path of liberation. So that's our adhikar, to listen to it. And as I said, in the proper company of devotees, definitely not like, like you and you yourself and your scripture. So especially such section like, I need the company of some devotees. And authorized, one has to receive some authorization, like that. Yeah. Because devotional service, as I was sharing earlier, especially the company of devotees, highly elevated devotees, it elevates us, it brings us above our limitations. It elevates our consciousness. So in such company one may hear that. Yeah, for example, as I was saying, this was like really nice. I mean, to hear, like Srila Prabhupada's disciples, who are like, some of them who are sannyasis, who are like Naistika brahmacharis. I mean, when you hear them, like discussing about these affairs, like, wow, I mean, then it's like, wow, this has to be, on the pure platform, because they are not any, like Sukadeva Goswami, he's not, interested in mundane affairs. So when you hear them speak like that, anyway, like His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj describing about one nice pastime in Vrindavan. It was once, anyways, I'll just end with that. So once somehow Radharani, she becomes, she's in her like Maan Leela. And then anything that Krishna does is not working basically. And so then of course, Vrinda Devi, she tells Krishna that you come, as a sannyasi. As a sannyasi. And then so Lord Krishna, he comes as a sannyasi, and then he comes to the house. And then so everybody is concerned about Radharani. And so the sannyasi Thakur says, oh, I can cure her. And so I was skipping many details, but then so all the gopis that are assembled, they think that the sannyasi Thakur, like they think that he's like he reads palms, So they give the hand of like Srimati Radharani to be held by the sannyasi Thakur. And the sannyasi says, oh, I'm a sannyasi, I don't hold hands. But he says, but if you ask your, Sakhi to lift her eyes, I look into her eyes. So the gopis are saying, whoa, what kind of a sannyasi Thakur are you? You're not going to hold her hand, but you can look into her eyes. So anyway, when I was hearing as well as Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj speak like that, it has to be, on the transcendental platform. And then of course, what happens is, as, the Leela, so then as their eyes meet, the power of Srimati Radharani's glance is so powerful that in Lord Krishna, he is not able to keep his sannyasi Thakur form. He transforms into Tribhanganandana and then, Haribol. Yeah. So these pastimes, like that, they're happening. Hare Krishna. Okay, I think we'll end here. Hare.